German Shepherd was trapped on a balcony. The baby's next move left everyone in tears. What you're about to listen to will shock you and leave you in tears. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community around the world. The storm came without warning that Tuesday evening, rolling across Pine Ridge Apartments like a dark blanket thrown over the city. 5-year-old Jake pressed his small face against the cool window of their second-floor apartment, watching raindrops race down the glass. The wind whistled through the courtyard below, making the old brick buildings groan and creak. "Mommy, listen," Jake whispered, his breath fogging the window. Emma looked up from folding laundry on the couch. "What is it, sweetie?" "Someone's crying." Emma paused, straining to hear over the rumble of thunder. Her husband David was in the kitchen making dinner, the sizzle of onions filling the apartment with warmth. All she could hear was the storm getting stronger outside. "I don't hear anything, Jake. Come away from the window before the lightning gets worse." But Jake didn't move. His tiny hands pressed flat against the glass, and his brown eyes grew wide with worry. "No, Mommy. He's really crying. He's scared." Emma set down the towel she was folding and walked over to her son. The courtyard was getting darker by the minute, and she could barely make out the building across from them. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the brick walls slick and shiny. Then she heard it. A thin, desperate whimpering carried across the narrow space between buildings. It was faint but unmistakable, the sound of an animal in distress. "David!" Emma called toward the kitchen. "Come here, quick!" David appeared, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "What's wrong?" "Listen," Emma said, moving closer to the window. The three of them stood silent for a moment. Another crack of thunder shook the building, and in the brief quiet that followed, they heard it again. A frantic scratching sound mixed with scared whimpers. Jake pointed across the courtyard to the building opposite theirs. "There!" "On the balcony!" Emma squinted through the rain. On the third floor, barely visible in the dim evening light, was a dark shape huddled on a small balcony. As lightning flickered across the sky, she could make out the outline of a large dog, soaking wet and clearly trapped. "Oh my God," she breathed. "That poor thing." The German Shepherd, for that's what it was pressed against the sliding glass door, scratching frantically at the surface. But something was wrong with the balcony gate. Even from their distance, Emma could see thick wire wrapped around the metal bars, holding it shut tight. "How did it get trapped out there?" David asked, leaning over Jake's shoulder to get a better view. "More importantly, how long has it been out there?" Emma's voice was tight with concern. The storm had been building for hours, and the temperature, that was dropping fast. Jake suddenly pressed both hands against the window and called out in his clear, high voice, "Don't worry, Charlie, we see you." Emma and David exchanged startled glances. "Jake, honey, what did you just call that dog?" "Charlie," Jake said matter-of-factly, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "That's his name. He told me." A chill ran down Emma's spine that had nothing to do with the storm. How could Jake possibly know the dog's name? They'd never seen this animal before in their lives. The wind picked up again, howling through the courtyard like a living thing. Emma watched in horror as the balcony where Charlie was trapped began to flood. The building's gutters were clogged with leaves and debris, and water was pouring down in sheets, pooling around the dog's paws. "We have to do something," she said urgently. "That balcony is flooding, and those tiles look slippery. If he tries to move around too much..." She didn't finish the sentence, but they all understood. It was a 3-story drop to the concrete courtyard below. David was already reaching for his jacket. "I'll go talk to the building manager. Maybe he has keys to that apartment." "Dad, hurry," Jake said, his small voice filled with worry. "Charlie is really scared. The water is getting higher." As if the dog could hear him, Charlie pressed closer to the sliding door and let out a long, mournful howl that cut through the storm like a knife. The sound sent shivers through everyone in the courtyard who heard it. David rushed out into the hallway and down to the manager's office. Emma stayed by the window with Jake, watching the desperate animal across the way. The rain was coming down in torrents now, and she could see Charlie's dark fur plastered against his body. "Mommy, why can't he get off the balcony?" Emma looked closer at the metal gate. There was definitely wire wrapped around it, but in the dim light and rain, she couldn't see exactly how it was secured. "I think something is blocking the gate, baby, but Daddy will find help," Minutes felt like hours as they waited. Charlie continued to pace the small balcony, his movements becoming more frantic as the water level rose. Every few seconds, he would press his nose to the glass door and whimper, as if begging someone inside to let him in. David came back upstairs, his hair dripping and his face grim. "The manager isn't in his office. I tried the apartment, 3B, but nobody's answering. The door is locked tight, and I mean really locked. There are at least 3 deadbolts." "What about animal control?" Emma asked. "I called them. They said they'll try to send someone, but with the storm, it could be hours." Jake made a small sound of distress. "Charlie doesn't have hours, Daddy. Look." They turned back to the window just in time to see one of the balcony tiles slide loose and tumble into the courtyard below. It hit the concrete with a sharp crack that echoed off the brick walls. "The tiles are coming. Loose," Emma whispered, her heart pounding. "If more of them fall..." Charlie seemed to sense the danger too. He moved carefully to the center of the small balcony, but his paws were slipping on the wet surface. The water was now deep enough to splash with each step he took. "We need to call the fire department," David said, pulling out his phone. Before he could dial, Jake tugged on his mother's shirt. "Mommy, someone else is watching too." Emma looked around the courtyard and saw several neighbors standing at their windows, all looking up at the trapped dog. On the first floor of the building across from them, an elderly woman had opened her window and was leaning out despite the rain. "That's Mrs. Helen," Emma said, recognizing their neighbor. "She's lived here longer than anyone." Mrs. Helen cupped her hands around her mouth and called up to them. "I've been watching that dog for 20 minutes. Someone needs to help him." David leaned out their window. "We're trying to reach the apartment owner. Do you know who lives in 3B? Mrs. Helen's reply sent ice through Emma's veins. "Nobody lives there. That apartment's been empty for weeks." "Then how did the dog get out there?" David shouted back. Mrs. Helen hesitated, glancing around the courtyard nervously. "I saw some men there earlier today," she called up. "Around noon, they were doing something to that balcony gate. Looked like they were wrapping wire around it." The implications hit Emma like a physical blow. This wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately trapped Charlie on that balcony. "On purpose?" she whispered to David. "Who would do such a thing?" Jake was still pressed to the window, and now he was crying quietly. "Charlie is so scared, Mommy. He keeps looking at me. He wants me to help him." Emma knelt down beside her son, her heart breaking. "Baby, we're going to help him, I promise. Daddy is calling people right now." But even as she said it, she could see the situation getting worse by the minute. Another tile shifted loose, hanging precariously over the edge. The water on the balcony was getting deeper, and Charlie was running out of safe space to stand. That's when Jake did something that would later bring tears to everyone who heard this story. He pulled away from the window and ran to his bedroom. Emma could hear him rummaging around, opening drawers and moving things. When he came back, he was carrying his favorite broom, the small one Emma had bought him so he could help with cleaning, and his beloved blue superhero cape. "Jake, what are you doing?" Her 5-year-old son had a look of determination on his face that was far too mature for his age. He sat down on the floor and began tying one end of the cape to the broom handle, his small fingers working carefully despite his tears. "I'm going to help Charlie," he said simply. "Sweetie, I don't understand." Jake finished tying the cape and stood up, carrying his makeshift flag to the window. The gap between their building and the one across was narrow, maybe 8 feet, and their second-floor window was almost level with the third-floor balcony where Charlie was trapped. With surprising strength for a 5-year-old, Jake pushed the window open wider and carefully extended the broom handle across the gap. The blue cape fluttered in the wind like a banner of hope. "Charlie," Jake called out in his clear, sweet voice. "Look at me, boy. When you get scared, you can hold on to my cape. Just bite it gently, okay? You can hold on to me." Emma's breath caught in her throat. Across the courtyard, the German shepherd stopped pacing and turned toward Jake's voice. For a long moment, the animal just stared at the little boy with the blue cape. Then, slowly, carefully, Charlie moved to the edge of the balcony closest to them. He stretched his neck forward and gently took the edge of the cape between his teeth. Not biting or pulling, just holding on like Jake had told him to. The sight was so pure, so innocent and heartbreaking, that Emma felt tears streaming down her face. Below in the courtyard, she could hear other neighbors crying too. Mrs. Helen had both hands over her heart, and several people had come out into the rain to watch this incredible moment. "That's it, Charlie," Jake whispered, his own tears mixing with the rain coming through the open window. "I've got you now. You're not alone anymore." The dog held onto the cape like a lifeline, his dark eyes never leaving Jake's face. For the first time since they had noticed him, Charlie stopped whimpering. He stood perfectly still, holding on to that small piece of blue fabric, as if it was the most precious thing in the world. But as touching as the moment was, it didn't solve the larger problem. Charlie was still trapped, the water was still rising, and more tiles were starting to shift loose from the balcony floor. That's when David noticed something that made his blood run cold. "Emma," he said quietly, trying not to alarm Jake. "Look at the balcony gate again. Look closely." Emma squinted through the rain. Now that she was really focusing, she could see that the wire around the gate wasn't just twisted shut. There was something else there, something metallic reflecting the occasional flash of lightning. "Is that—" "A padlock," David confirmed grimly. "Someone didn't just twist wire around that gate. They locked it shut with a padlock." The realization hit them both at the same time. This wasn't just cruel neglect or someone accidentally leaving their dog outside during a storm. This was deliberate. Someone had trapped Charlie on that balcony intentionally, with no way to escape. But who would do such a thing? And more importantly, were they still around? As if in answer to their unspoken questions, David spotted something that made him grab Emma's arm. "Look," he whispered, pointing down to the street beyond the courtyard. A black SUV was parked under the streetlight at the end of the block. Its engine was running, and through the rain-streaked windshield, they could make out two figures sitting inside, watching the buildings. Watching them. Emma pulled Jake back from the window slightly, her maternal instincts kicking into overdrive. "David, who are those people?" "I don't know, but I don't like this. First someone deliberately traps that dog, and now we have people watching from a car? This doesn't feel like a coincidence." Jake, still holding his broom steady so Charlie could keep hold of the cape, looked up at his parents with worry. "Mommy, Daddy, what's wrong? Is Charlie going to be okay?" Emma knelt down beside her son, trying to keep her voice calm. "We're going to make sure he's okay, baby, but we need to be very careful." As if sensing the tension, Charlie pressed closer to the balcony railing, still gently holding the blue cape. The water around his paws was getting deeper, and another tile shifted ominously near the edge. Time was running out, and now they had to worry about more than just the storm. Someone had put Charlie in this situation deliberately, and those same people might still be watching. The question was, what did they want, and how far were they willing to go to get it? The rain continued to pound against the windows as Emma tried to process what was happening. Her 5-year-old son was still holding the broom steady. His blue cape stretched across the narrow courtyard gap, while Charlie held onto it like his life depended on it. And maybe it did. "We need to do something fast," David said, his eyes moving between the trapped dog and the mysterious SUV parked down the street. "Those tiles are getting more unstable by the minute." Emma could see he was right. Water was now pooling several inches deep on the balcony, and every gust of wind seemed to loosen more tiles around the edges. Charlie was doing his best to stay in the center, but his space was shrinking. "Jake, sweetie, you're doing such a good job helping Charlie," Emma said softly. "But I need you to listen to Mommy very carefully, okay?" Jake nodded, never taking his eyes off the dog. "Is Charlie going to be okay?" "We're going to make sure he is, but I need you to keep holding that broom very steady while Daddy and I figure out how to get him down from there." David was already moving toward the door. "I'm going to try to find another way into that apartment, maybe through the fire escape or—" "Wait," Emma grabbed his arm. "What about those people in the car? What if they're connected to whoever did this?" Before David could answer, Mrs. Helen's voice carried up from the courtyard below. She was shouting something, but the wind and rain made it hard to understand. Emma leaned out the window, careful not to disturb Jake's position. "What did you say, Mrs. Helen?" The elderly woman cupped her hands around her mouth. "I said, be careful. Those men who were here earlier, I think they're back." Emma's blood ran cold. She looked down the street toward the SUV, but, from her angle, she couldn't see it clearly anymore. "What men? Can you see them?" "Two of them got out of a black car. They're asking questions at the front desk." David and Emma exchanged worried glances. If these men were responsible for trapping Charlie, they might not be happy about the rescue attempts drawing attention. "Daddy," Jake said quietly, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Charlie is trying to tell me something." Emma looked across at the dog. Charlie was still holding the cape, but now he was making soft whining sounds, almost like he was trying to communicate. His ears were perked up, alert to something they couldn't hear. "What do you think he's trying to say, baby?" Jake tilted his head, as if listening carefully. "He says the bad men are coming back. He says they're angry." A chill ran down Emma's spine. How could a 5-year-old possibly know that? But before she could think about it more, they heard heavy footsteps in the hallway outside their apartment. Multiple sets of footsteps, moving fast. David moved quickly to the door and looked through the peephole. "There are 3 men in the hallway," he whispered urgently. "They're going apartment to apartment, knocking on doors. What should we do? Keep helping Charlie. I'll handle this." But Jake suddenly pulled back from the window, the broom wavering in his small hands. "Mommy, Charlie is scared. He says to hide." "Hide? Why would—" Their question was answered by a sharp knock on their door. Not a friendly neighbor knock, but an aggressive, demanding sound that made Emma's heart race. "Just stay calm," David whispered to his family. Then, louder, toward the door. "Who is it?" A gruff voice answered from the hallway. "Building maintenance. We need to talk to you about a noise complaint." Emma frowned. Building maintenance at 8 o'clock at night, during a storm? That didn't make sense. David looked through the peephole again and shook his head. "These aren't maintenance workers," he mouthed silently. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. "Open up! We know you're in there." Jake was still holding the broom, but his hands were shaking now. Across the courtyard, Charlie seemed to sense the danger too. The dog had moved as far back on the balcony as he could, while still keeping hold of the cape. "What do you want?" David called through the door, stalling for time. "We're here about the dog situation. Open the door, and we can discuss this civilly." Emma felt a surge of protective anger. These were the people who had trapped Charlie out there to suffer and possibly die. And now they were at her door, demanding entry while her family was trying to help. "I don't think so," David said firmly. "If you're legitimate building staff, you can come back during normal hours with proper identification." There was a moment of silence, then the sound of hushed, urgent conversation in the hallway. Emma couldn't make out the words, but the tone was definitely threatening. "Mommy," Jake whispered, "Charlie says they have something that hurts dogs. He's really scared." Emma's maternal instincts kicked into overdrive. Whatever these men wanted, they weren't getting near her child. She moved to the window and looked down at Mrs. Helen, who was still standing in the courtyard despite the rain. "Mrs. Helen," she called down, "can you call the police? Tell them we have people trying to break into apartments." The elderly woman nodded and pulled out her phone. But before she could dial, one of the men from the hallway appeared in the courtyard below. He walked right up to Mrs. Helen and said something that made her face go white with fear. She quickly put her phone away and hurried back toward her building. "They just threatened Mrs. Helen," Emma told David, her voice tight with worry. The knocking on their door had stopped, but that somehow felt more ominous than the aggressive demands. David peered through the peephole again. "They're gone," he said, confused. "The hallway is empty." But Jake suddenly gasped and pointed toward the window. "Look, Charlie is trying to warn us." Across the courtyard, Charlie had dropped the cape and was barking frantically, his head turned toward something they couldn't see from their angle. He was using his body to block the sliding glass door, as if protecting something or someone inside the empty apartment. "What's he barking at?" Emma wondered aloud. Her question was answered when they heard a new sound, the screech of metal on metal coming from above them. Someone was on the roof, moving around with heavy equipment. The fire escape, David realized. They're trying to get to Charlie from above. Emma felt panic rising in her chest. But why? What do they want with him? Jake had picked up his broom again and was trying to get Charlie's attention, but the dog was still focused on whatever threat was approaching from the roof. The little boy's face was streaked with tears of frustration and fear. "Charlie, come back," Jake called out desperately. "Hold on to my cape. Don't let them take you." As if he understood every word, Charlie turned back toward them. But instead of taking the cape, he did something that broke everyone's heart. He sat down in the middle of the flooded balcony, looked directly at Jake, and let out a long, mournful howl that seemed to say goodbye. "No!" Jake cried out. "Charlie, don't give up! I'm coming to get you!" Before Emma could stop him, Jake started to climb onto the windowsill, still clutching his broom. He was actually going to try to cross the gap himself. "Jake, no!" Emma grabbed her son and pulled him back inside. "Baby, you can't. It's too dangerous." "But Charlie needs me, Mommy. The bad men are going to hurt him." Emma's heart was breaking. Her 5-year-old son was showing more courage and compassion than most adults, but she couldn't let him risk his life. Not even for Charlie. That's when they heard a new voice from somewhere below. Calm, steady, and completely unexpected. "Hey there, little man. I think I can help with that." They all looked down to see a man in a worn work jacket standing in the courtyard. He was tall and lean, with weathered hands and kind eyes that seemed to take in the whole situation at once. He was carrying a long extension ladder and what looked like a toolbox. "Who are you?" David called down. "Name's Sam. I'm the building's maintenance supervisor, the real one," he added with a slight smile. "I heard there was some trouble up here." Emma felt a flicker of hope. "Are you here to help Charlie?" Sam looked up at the trapped dog, then at Jake with his makeshift flag. "That's the plan, but we need to move fast. I saw those fake maintenance guys heading up to the roof. They've got bolt cutters and what looks like some kind of animal control equipment." Jake leaned out the window eagerly. "You're going to save Charlie?" "We're going to save Charlie," Sam corrected gently. "But I'm going to need your help, son. That cape of yours, that's keeping him calm and focused. Without that connection, he might panic when I try to reach him." Emma looked at this stranger who had appeared like an answer to their prayers. "How do we know we can trust you?" Sam's expression grew serious. "Ma'am, I've been working in these buildings for 15 years. I know every resident, every pet, every hiding spot. That dog up there, he doesn't belong to anyone in this complex. He was put there by people who wanted him to suffer. And I don't stand for that kind of cruelty on my watch." David made a quick decision. "What do you need us to do?" "Keep that boy with the cape right where he is. Charlie trusts him, and that trust is the only thing keeping that dog from doing something desperate right now." Sam was already setting up his ladder against the side of their building. "I'm going to climb up to your level, then work my way across to the fire escape on the other building." "But what about those men on the roof?" Sam's jaw tightened. "Let me worry about them. You just keep Charlie focused on that blue cape." As Sam began climbing the ladder with surprising agility for a man his age, Emma noticed something else. The black SUV was back, parked even closer to the building now. And there were more vehicles. A white van and another dark sedan. "David, look at the street. There are more of them." David followed her gaze and swore under his breath. "What have we stumbled into?" Jake, still holding his broom steady, looked up at his parents with wide, serious eyes. "Charlie says they do bad things to dogs who won't fight. He says he won't fight, so they were going to make him fall." Emma's blood turned to ice. "Make him fall? You mean they were going to push him off the balcony and make it look like an accident?" Jake said matter-of-factly, as if he was repeating exactly what Charlie had told him. The pieces were starting to come together in Emma's mind, and the picture they formed was horrifying. Someone was using that empty apartment as a staging ground for something involving dogs. Charlie had refused to cooperate, so they'd decided to get rid of him in a way that would look accidental. But their plan was being disrupted by a 5-year-old boy with a superhero cape and a building maintenance man who refused to look the other way. Sam had reached their window level and was now carefully extending a narrow plank from his ladder to the fire escape of the opposite building. It was a precarious crossing, but he moved with the confidence of someone who'd done dangerous work his whole life. "Almost there, Charlie," Sam called out as he inched across the plank. "Just hold on a little longer." But Charlie wasn't looking at Sam. The dog's attention was still fixed on Jake and the blue cape that fluttered between the buildings like a banner of hope. "Charlie, listen to the man," Jake called out encouragingly. "He's going to help you, but don't let go of my cape, okay? I'm not going anywhere." Emma watched her son with a mixture of pride and terror. Jake was showing incredible bravery, but they were all in serious danger now. The men who had trapped Charlie weren't just cruel. They were part of something bigger and more sinister. Sam reached the fire escape and began working his way down toward the 3rd floor. But as he did, they all heard new sounds from the roof above Charlie's balcony. Heavy footsteps, the clink of metal tools, and urgent whispered conversations. "They're right above him," Emma whispered. Jake seemed to sense it too. He stretched the broom out a little further, making the cape dance in the wind. "Charlie, don't look up there. Look at me. Look at my cape. Everything's going to be okay." But even as he said it, A piece of equipment, it looked like some kind of hook on a long pole, appeared over the edge of the roof above Charlie's balcony. Someone was trying to reach down and grab the dog from above. Charlie saw it too, and pressed himself against the far railing, still holding Jake's cape, but clearly terrified. The balcony tiles were so slippery now that he was struggling to keep his footing. "Sam!" David shouted. "They're trying to grab him from the roof." Sam looked up, and his expression darkened. "Not on my watch." He pulled something from his tool belt. It looked like a flare gun. Without hesitation, he aimed it at the roof and fired. A bright red flare exploded above the building, lighting up the night sky like a small firework. The effect was immediate. The hook disappeared back over the roof edge, and they could hear shouting and the sound of people running. "What was that for?" Emma asked. Sam was already working on the lock that held Charlie's balcony gate shut. "Emergency signal. Every cop in a 6-block radius knows that flare. They'll be here in minutes." Jake laughed with delight. "Did you see that, Charlie? The bad men are running away." But their celebration was premature. The flare had scared off the men on the roof, but it had also attracted attention from the vehicles on the street. Emma could see people getting out of the black SUV and the white van, and they didn't look happy. "Sam, you need to hurry," she called out. "There are more of them coming up from the street." Sam had the bolt cutters out now and was working on the padlock. "Almost got it," he grunted, applying pressure. "This lock is industrial grade. They really didn't want this dog getting away." Charlie seemed to understand that rescue was close. He moved as near to the gate as he dared, still keeping one eye on Jake's cape for comfort. "That's it, boy," Sam encouraged as he worked. "Just a few more seconds." The padlock gave way with a sharp crack and the gate swung open. Charlie didn't hesitate. He bolted through the opening and straight into Sam's arms, just as the first of the men from the street reached the fire escape below. "Got him!" Sam called out triumphantly, cradling the soaking wet German shepherd like he was precious cargo. "Now let's get out of here." But getting down wasn't going to be as easy as getting up. The men from the vehicles had blocked access to the fire escape, and they could hear more footsteps pounding up the stairs inside the building. Jake was jumping up and down with excitement. "Charlie is free! Charlie is free!" But Emma realized they weren't out of danger yet. In fact, with Charlie now in Sam's arms, the men might be even more desperate to get him back. "Sam, how are you going to get down?" she called out. Sam looked around, assessing their options. The narrow plank was too unstable to cross while carrying a large dog. The fire escape was blocked, and the sounds of pursuit were getting closer. That's when Charlie did something amazing. Instead of struggling or panicking in Sam's arms, the dog looked directly across at Jake and barked once. A clear, strong bark that sounded almost like, "Thank you." Then he gently took the edge of Jake's blue cape in his mouth one more time, holding it like a promise. "I think he's telling us he's not giving up," Jake said with a huge smile, "and neither are we." Emma looked at her brave little boy, at the kind maintenance man risking his life for a stranger's dog, and at Charlie who had survived being trapped and terrorized but still had trust and love to give. In the distance, she could hear sirens getting closer. Sam's flare had worked. Help was coming. But would it arrive in time? And what exactly were they all caught up in? The answers would have to wait, because right now, they had a German shepherd to save and some very dangerous people to avoid. And somehow, a 5-year-old boy with a superhero cape had become the center of it all. The sirens were getting louder, but Sam was still trapped on the fire escape with Charlie in his arms. The men from the street had positioned themselves at the bottom of the metal stairs, effectively blocking his escape route. Emma could see their flashlights cutting through the rain as they searched for another way up. "Sam, can you get to the roof?" David called out. "Maybe, but then what? These guys have people up there too." Sam adjusted his grip on Charlie, who was surprisingly calm despite everything happening around him. "We need another option." That's when Jake did something that would later become the most talked about moment of the entire rescue. He carefully set down his broom and began untying his blue cape from the handle. "Jake, what are you doing?" Emma asked, worried her son was giving up. "I'm not giving up, Mommy. I'm getting ready for the next part." Jake's 5-year-old voice was steady and determined. "Charlie needs to come home with us. He needs to be safe." Before anyone could stop him, Jake climbed back onto the windowsill and began unwrapping the cape from his small shoulders. The wind immediately caught the fabric, making it billow out like a real superhero's cape. "Jake, be careful." Emma reached for him, but Jake held up a small hand. "It's okay, Mommy. I know what to do." He looked across at Charlie, who was watching him intently from Sam's arms. "Charlie, this cape kept you brave when you were scared, right?" The dog made a soft whining sound that somehow sounded like agreement. "Well, now it's going to help you get home." Jake carefully wrapped one end of the cape around his wrist and extended the other end towards Sam. "Sam, can you tie this around Charlie, like a superhero cape for dogs?" Emma's breath caught in her throat. Her little boy was trying to create some kind of zip line or safety rope using his beloved cape. It was incredibly brave and incredibly dangerous. Sam understood immediately. "That's brilliant, little man. But are you sure? This cape means a lot to you." Jake nodded seriously. "Charlie needs it more than I do right now. Besides, real superheroes share their powers." Tears were streaming down Emma's face as she watched her son carefully extend the cape across the gap. Sam managed to tie the other end around Charlie's chest like a harness, creating a makeshift safety line between the buildings. "Now, if something happens, Charlie won't fall," Jake explained to his parents. "The cape will keep him safe." But their touching moment was interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs below Sam's position. The men were getting closer, and their voices were becoming more aggressive. "Time to move," Sam muttered, looking around desperately for an escape route. That's when Mrs. Helen appeared again in the courtyard, this time carrying something in her hands. She was moving quickly despite her age, staying close to the building walls to avoid being seen by the men with flashlights. "Sam!" she called up in a loud whisper. "The basement. There's a tunnel that connects the buildings." Emma had never heard of any tunnel, but Mrs. Helen had lived in these apartments longer than anyone. If she said there was a tunnel, there probably was. "Where's the entrance?" Sam called back. "First floor, utility room, but you'll have to get down here first." Sam looked at the men blocking the fire escape, then at Charlie in his arms, then at the blue cape connecting him to Jake across the courtyard. "I think I have an idea, but it's gonna be crazy." "Crazier than everything else that's happened tonight?" David asked. Sam actually smiled. "Fair point." He carefully positioned Charlie so the dog was secure in his arms, then began climbing up the fire escape instead of down. "Where are you going?" Emma called out, confused. "The roof. If they want to play games, let's play games." Jake clapped his hands together excitedly. "Charlie's going on an adventure." Emma wasn't so sure this was something to celebrate, but she had to admit Sam seemed to know what he was doing. The maintenance supervisor moved with surprising agility, carrying Charlie like he weighed nothing at all. When they reached the roof level, Sam disappeared from view for a moment. Emma could hear voices up there, angry, urgent conversations that didn't sound friendly. Then suddenly, Sam reappeared at the edge of the roof, but now he was carrying more than just Charlie. He had a length of rope and what looked like a pulley system. "Building maintenance perks," he called down with a grin. "Always come prepared for anything." Emma watched in amazement as Sam quickly rigged up a zip line from the roof of Charlie's building to a secure point on their building's roof. It was like something out of an action movie, except this was really happening in their quiet apartment complex. "This is so cool!" Jake exclaimed, bouncing on his toes. "Charlie gets to fly." "Jake, honey, maybe don't watch this part," Emma said nervously. The idea of a man and a large dog sliding down a rope in a thunderstorm was terrifying, but Jake shook his head firmly. "I have to watch. Charlie needs to see friendly faces when he lands. He needs to know we're here." Emma's heart swelled with pride. Her son's courage and compassion were incredible, even in this dangerous situation. Sam was ready to make his descent, but first he called down to them. "Jake, keep that cape visible. Charlie needs to see his safety line." Jake immediately held up his end of the cape, letting it flutter in the wind like a beacon. Charlie, secure in Sam's arms and the makeshift harness, barked once as if to say he was ready. Then they were sliding down the rope, moving fast through the rain and wind. Emma held her breath as they descended, praying that Sam's improvised rescue plan would work. They landed with a thud on the roof of Emma's building, both Sam and Charlie rolling safely away from the edge. Jake cheered so loudly that neighbors in surrounding buildings started turning on their lights to see what was happening. "They made it!" Jake shouted. "Charlie made it!" But their celebration was cut short by the sound of car doors slamming in the street below. The men in the vehicles had realized what was happening and were now trying to get into Emma's building. "We need to get inside now," David said urgently. Sam appeared at their window moments later, still carrying Charlie. The German Shepherd was wet and shaken, but very much alive and unharmed. As soon as he saw Jake, Charlie's tail started wagging for the first time all evening. "Can we let them in?" Emma asked David. "Of course we can. They saved Charlie." David opened the window wider, and Sam carefully handed Charlie through. The moment the dog's paws touched the floor of their apartment, he went straight to Jake and gently licked the little boy's face. Jake giggled and wrapped his arms around Charlie's neck. "You're safe now. You're going to be okay." Sam climbed through the window and immediately went to check the apartment door. "Those men will be up here soon. We need to get to Mrs. Helen's tunnel." "What about Charlie?" Emma asked. "Will he be able to make it through a tunnel?" Sam looked at the dog, who was still staying close to Jake. "He's a tough one, but more importantly, he trusts your boy. As long as Jake's with him, Charlie will follow." The sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway confirmed Sam's fears. The men had found a way into the building and were checking every apartment. "Back door," David suggested. "We can use the service stairs." "Too risky. They'll have people watching all the exits by now." Sam was thinking fast, his eyes scanning the apartment for options. "Mrs. Helen said the utility room, first floor. We'll have to get creative." That's when Jake, still sitting on the floor with his arms around Charlie, looked up with bright eyes. "I know how! Charlie showed me." "Showed you what, sweetie?" Emma asked. "The laundry chute. It goes down to the basement." Emma and David exchanged glances. Their building did have an old laundry chute that connected each floor to the basement laundry room. But it hadn't been used in years, and it was definitely not designed for people. "Jake, that's very dangerous," Emma said gently. "People can't go down laundry chutes." "But Charlie can," Jake insisted. "And if Charlie goes first, we can follow him. He'll show us it's safe." Sam was examining the laundry chute access in their hallway closet. "It's narrow, but it might work. The drop isn't straight down. It angles and has some catch points that would slow our descent." "You're seriously considering this?" David asked. "Those men are armed, and they're not going to stop until they get Charlie back. Whatever they're involved in, that dog is important to them." Sam's expression was grim. "We can try to fight them off and wait for the police, or we can get Charlie somewhere safe and let the authorities handle the rest." The sound of doors being kicked in down the hall made the decision for them. "Laundry chute it is," David said. Emma's maternal instincts were screaming that this was insane, but looking at her brave little boy and the dog who had already been through so much, she knew they had to try. "Jake goes first," Sam decided. "He's smallest and lightest. Charlie will follow him because he trusts him. Then Emma, then David, then me, to make sure no one follows us down." Jake was already moving toward the closet, completely unafraid. "Come on, Charlie. We're going to slide down to safety." Charlie followed Jake to the laundry chute opening. The dog looked down the dark shaft, then at Jake, then back down the shaft. After a moment, he sat down and barked once, apparently giving his approval to the plan. "See?" Jake said proudly. "Charlie thinks it's a good idea too." Emma helped Jake climb into the chute opening. "Remember, keep your arms close to your body and try to slow yourself down if you feel like you're going too fast." "I will, Mommy, and I'll make sure Charlie lands safely too." Before Emma could change her mind or worry anymore, Jake pushed off and disappeared down the chute with a faint whooshing sound. Charlie immediately followed, his natural athleticism helping him navigate the narrow space. Emma went next, her heart pounding as she slid down through the darkness. The chute was surprisingly smooth, and the angles did help slow her descent. She landed in a pile of old laundry in the basement, with Jake already helping Charlie out of the chute opening. David came down next, followed quickly by Sam. They had all made it safely to the basement, just as they heard angry voices and the sound of their apartment door being broken down several floors above. "This way," Sam whispered, leading them through the maze of basement storage rooms toward the back of the building. Emma was amazed at how well Jake and Charlie were handling everything. The 5-year-old boy had his hand resting on the dog's head, and Charlie stayed right beside him like they had been best friends their whole lives. There, Sam pointed to a section of wall that looked different from the rest. Mrs. Helen was right. There's the tunnel entrance. What Emma had expected to be a rough, scary tunnel was actually a well-maintained service corridor that connected the basements of several buildings in the complex. It was clean, well lit, and wide enough for them to walk comfortably. "This has been here the whole time?" David asked in amazement. "Old buildings have lots of secrets," Sam replied. Good thing Mrs. Helen remembered this one. As they walked through the tunnel, Charlie stayed close to Jake, occasionally looking up at the boy with what could only be described as gratitude. The blue cape was still tied around the dog's chest like a superhero costume, and it seemed to give him confidence. "Charlie really likes his cape," Jake observed happily. "I think Charlie likes his hero," Emma corrected, ruffling her son's hair. They emerged from the tunnel in the basement of a building 3 blocks away, far from the chaos they had left behind. Sam led them up to the ground level, where Mrs. Helen was waiting with a thermos of hot chocolate and a pile of warm towels. "I figured you'd all be cold and wet when you got here," she said with a motherly smile. As they dried off and warmed up, the sound of sirens filled the night air. Police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances were converging on their apartment building. "Think they'll catch those men?" David asked. Sam nodded confidently. "With the evidence we can provide and the disruption they caused tonight, those guys are going to have a lot of explaining to do." Jake was sitting on the floor with Charlie, sharing his hot chocolate with the dog. "Charlie says thank you for saving him. He says he was really scared, but my cape made him brave." Emma looked at her son and the dog, who had somehow become part of their family in the space of a few hours. "Jake, how do you always know what Charlie is thinking?" Jake shrugged as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "He talks to me, not with words, but with his eyes and his feelings. He's very smart." Charlie rested his head on Jake's lap and closed his eyes for the first time since they'd found him on the balcony. Finally, he felt safe. But even as they sat in the warm, quiet apartment, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that their adventure wasn't quite over yet. Her instincts proved correct when Mrs. Helen suddenly froze while pouring more hot chocolate. "There's a car outside," she whispered, peering through her curtains. "A white van. It's been sitting there for 10 minutes. Sam immediately moved to the window, staying out of sight. "Same van from earlier. They're not giving up." Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. "How did they find us?" "They're probably checking every building in the area," David said grimly. "They know we can't have gone far." Jake looked up from where he was cuddling with Charlie. "Are the bad men still looking for us?" "Don't worry, sweetie," Emma said, trying to keep her voice calm. "We're safe here." But Charlie suddenly lifted his head, his ears perked and alert. The dog stood up slowly, moving away from Jake toward the apartment door. He was listening to something the humans couldn't hear. "What is it, boy?" Sam asked quietly. Charlie turned back to look at them, and Emma could swear she saw intelligence and warning in the dog's dark eyes. He barked once, very softly, then moved to position himself between Jake and the door. "He hears something," Jake said with certainty. "Charlie says they're checking the buildings, going door to door." Mrs. Helen's face went pale. "They can't come in here without a warrant, can they?" "If they're not real police, they don't need warrants," Sam replied darkly. "And something tells me these guys aren't too concerned about following the law." As if to prove his point, they heard the sound of the building's front door opening downstairs. Heavy footsteps echoed in the lobby, followed by aggressive knocking on the first-floor apartments. "We need to move," Sam said urgently. "Mrs. Helen, is there another way out of this building?" The elderly woman thought for a moment. "The fire escape in the back, but it's old and rusty. I'm not sure it would hold all of us." Charlie moved closer to Jake and gently took the boy's hand in his mouth, not biting, just holding on like he was trying to communicate something important. "Charlie has an idea," Jake announced. "He says there's a place to hide, a safe place." Emma looked at her son with amazement and growing concern. The connection between Jake and Charlie was becoming stronger and more mysterious with each passing hour. "Jake, how can you possibly know what Charlie is thinking?" "I just do, Mommy. He shows me pictures in my head." Jake stood up and took Charlie's collar gently. "Come on, Charlie, show them." The dog immediately moved toward the back of Mrs. Helen's apartment, past the kitchen, and toward a door that Emma had assumed was a closet. "That's just the storage room," Mrs. Helen said, confused. But Charlie was scratching at the door insistently, looking back at them with urgent eyes. Sam opened the door and shined his phone's flashlight inside. Instead of shelves and boxes, they saw another tunnel entrance, this one even more hidden than the one they'd used before. "How many secret passages does this place have?" David asked in amazement. Mrs. Helen looked as surprised as everyone else. "I've lived here for 30 years, and I never knew that was there." The knocking was getting closer. They could hear it on the second floor now, just one floor below them. "Charlie knew," Jake said simply. "Dogs have really good noses. He could smell the air moving through the tunnel." Sam examined the passage quickly. "This one's different, older, probably from when these buildings were first constructed." He looked back at the group. "It's our best option." Emma helped Jake gather his things while Charlie waited patiently by the tunnel entrance. The dog seemed calmer now, as if he knew he was leading them to safety. "Mrs. Helen, are you coming with us?" Emma asked. The elderly woman shook her head. "I'm too old for crawling through tunnels. Besides, someone needs to stay here and make sure those men don't get suspicious. I'll tell them I haven't seen anything unusual." "Are you sure you'll be safe?" David asked, concerned. Mrs. Helen smiled bravely. "I've been dealing with troublemakers longer than you've been alive, young man. I'll be fine." Sam was already helping Jake into the tunnel. "This passage goes in a different direction than the other one. If I'm reading the building layout correctly, it should come out near the park about 4 blocks away." Charlie followed Jake into the tunnel without hesitation, and Emma was struck again by how much the dog trusted her son. It was like they had an unbreakable bond that had formed in just a few hours. The tunnel was darker and narrower than the previous one, but Charlie seemed to know exactly where he was going. His nose led them through, turns and passages that Emma would never have found on her own. "How does he know this place so well?" she whispered to Sam. "Dogs have incredible spatial memory," Sam replied. "But this feels like more than that. It's like he's been planning this route." Jake, crawling just behind Charlie, suddenly stopped. "Charlie wants to tell us something important." They all paused in the cramped tunnel as Jake seemed to listen to something only he could hear. "He says the bad men have been using these tunnels too. That's how they've been moving around without being seen. But Charlie knows a secret way they don't know about." Emma felt her blood run cold. "The men who trapped Charlie know about the tunnels?" "Some of them," Jake confirmed, "but not all of them. Charlie learned about the secret ones when he was trying to escape before." The implication was terrifying. Charlie had been trapped and terrorized by these people multiple times. Tonight wasn't the first time they'd tried to hurt him. "What else does Charlie remember?" Sam asked gently. Jake was quiet for a moment, his small hand resting on Charlie's head. When he spoke again, his voice was sad. "There were other dogs. Charlie tried to help them, but he couldn't. The bad men took them away." Emma's heart broke. Whatever criminal operation they'd stumbled into, it involved multiple animals and had been going on for some time. Charlie started moving again, leading them through what felt like a maze of connected basements and service corridors. Emma was completely lost, but the dog never hesitated. He knew exactly where he was going. Finally, they saw light ahead. Not artificial light, but the gray light of early dawn filtering down from above. "We've been down here for hours," David realized, checking his phone. "It's almost morning." They emerged from the tunnel through a grate hidden behind bushes in the park. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and sparkling with raindrops. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in soft pink and gold. Charlie immediately perked up in the fresh air and open space. He started wagging his tail and playfully bumped against Jake, who giggled with delight. "Look how happy he is," Jake said, throwing his arms around Charlie's neck. "He loves being outside when it's safe." Emma looked around the quiet park. Early morning joggers were starting to appear on the distant paths, and the sound of normal city life was beginning to replace the chaos of the night before. "What do we do now?" she asked Sam. Before Sam could answer, his phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and smiled with relief. "That was Officer Martinez from the local precinct. They arrested 5 men at your building, and they found evidence of a major dogfighting operation in that empty apartment." Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. "So, it's over?" "The immediate danger is over," Sam confirmed. "But Charlie is still technically evidence in a criminal case. He'll need to stay somewhere safe until the investigation is complete." Jake looked up with worried eyes. "Charlie can't go back to those bad men, can he?" "No way," Sam assured him. "Charlie is going to be safe from now on, I promise." But Jake wasn't satisfied with that answer. He stood up and faced his parents with a serious expression that looked far too mature for a 5-year-old. "Mommy, Daddy, Charlie needs to come home with us." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She'd been dreading this moment, knowing that Jake had formed an incredible bond with Charlie, but not sure what they could possibly do about it. "Sweetie, Charlie isn't our dog. He belongs to someone else, or he'll need to go to a shelter until—" "No," Jake interrupted firmly. "Charlie doesn't belong to anyone bad anymore, and he doesn't want to go to a shelter. He wants to stay with us." Emma looked at David, who was clearly struggling with the same emotions she was feeling. Charlie had become part of their family somehow, and the idea of separating him from Jake felt wrong. "Jake, taking care of a big dog is a huge responsibility," David said gently. "Charlie needs lots of food and space to run and veterinary care." "I'll share my allowance," Jake said immediately. "And I'll walk him every day and teach him tricks. And—" His voice started to break with emotion. "Daddy, Charlie saved my life tonight too. When I was scared, Charlie made me brave. We need each other." Emma knelt down beside her son. "How did Charlie save your life, baby?" Jake thought for a moment, trying to find the right words. "When the bad men were coming, and I was really scared, Charlie showed me how to be brave. He was trapped and scared too, but he didn't give up. He taught me that being scared is okay, but you have to keep trying to help people anyway." Emma felt tears starting to flow again. Her son had learned more about courage and compassion in one night than most people learned in a lifetime. Sam cleared his throat gently. "Actually, there might be a way to make this work. Since Charlie was a victim of animal cruelty, and since he clearly has a strong bond with your family, the court might approve a temporary foster arrangement while the case is being processed." Jake's face lit up with hope. "Really? Charlie could live with us?" "It's possible," Sam said carefully. "But it would be temporary at first, and your parents would have to agree to take on all the responsibilities of caring for a large dog." Emma looked at Charlie, who was sitting patiently beside Jake with the blue cape still around his chest like a superhero costume. The dog looked back at her with intelligent, grateful eyes, and she could see why Jake felt such a strong connection to him. "David, what do you think?" she asked her husband. David was quiet for a long moment, watching Jake gently pet Charlie's head. "I think we've all been through something extraordinary tonight, and I think Charlie has earned his place in our family." Jake let out a whoop of joy and hugged Charlie so tightly that the dog's tail started wagging furiously. "But," David continued seriously, "this is going to be a big change for all of us. Charlie is going to need training and medical care and lots of love and attention." "I know, Daddy. I'm ready. We're both ready." Jake looked at Charlie, who barked once as if agreeing. Emma smiled through her tears. "Well then, I guess we should go home and get our new family member settled in." As they started walking toward the park exit, Charlie staying perfectly at Jake's side, Emma reflected on the incredible night they'd all had. Her 5-year-old son had shown courage that amazed her. They'd discovered hidden tunnels and secret passages she never knew existed, and they'd helped break up a criminal operation. But, most importantly, they'd saved Charlie and gained a new family member in the process. "Mommy," Jake said as they walked, "do you think Charlie will always remember tonight?" Emma looked down at the dog, who was contentedly walking beside Jake with the blue cape fluttering behind him like a real superhero. "I think Charlie will remember tonight forever, sweetie. Just like we will." "Good," Jake said with satisfaction, "because tonight was when Charlie became part of our family. And families always remember their special days." Emma had to agree. This was definitely a night they would all remember for the rest of their lives. But their peaceful walk through the park was interrupted when Charlie suddenly stopped and growled low in his throat. His ears flattened against his head, and he moved protectively in front of Jake. "What's wrong, boy?" Sam asked, immediately alert. Before anyone could answer, 2 black SUVs pulled up at different entrances to the park. Men in dark clothing got out and began walking purposefully in their direction. "How did they find us?" David asked, his voice tight with fear. Sam was already scanning for escape routes. "They must have been watching all the tunnel exits. They knew we'd have to come up somewhere." Emma grabbed Jake's hand. "We need to get out of here, now." But Jake didn't move. Instead, he knelt down beside Charlie and placed both hands on the dog's head. "Charlie says we can't keep running forever. He says it's time to be brave." "Jake, sweetie, this isn't the time for—" "No, Mommy, Charlie is right." Jake stood up, still holding on to Charlie's collar. These bad men hurt Charlie and other dogs. If we keep running, they'll just hurt more dogs later. Emma's heart was pounding as the men got closer. There were at least 6 of them, spread out to prevent any escape. But as she looked at her 5-year-old son standing there with such determination, she felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. "What are you saying, Jake?" "I'm saying Charlie and I aren't running anymore. We're going to stop them." Sam stepped closer to the family. "Kid, I admire your courage, but these men are dangerous. We need to get you somewhere safe." Jake shook his head firmly. "Charlie says the police are coming. He can hear the sirens even though we can't yet. We just have to be brave for a little bit longer." As if summoned by Jake's words, the distant sound of sirens began to echo across the park. The men in black noticed it too and started moving faster toward them. That's when Charlie did something extraordinary. Instead of cowering or running, he stepped forward and sat down directly in the path of the approaching men. He looked up at Jake and barked once as if asking for permission. "What's he doing?" Emma asked. Jake's eyes lit up with understanding. Charlie wants to show them he's not afraid anymore. He wants to prove that love is stronger than being mean. The lead man, a tall figure with cold eyes, stopped about 10 feet away from them. "That dog belongs to us. Hand him over and nobody gets hurt." Sam stepped protectively in front of the family. "That dog doesn't belong to anyone. He's a victim of animal cruelty and he's under police protection now." The man laughed harshly. "What police? I don't see any police." But Jake did something that shocked everyone. He walked forward until he was standing right beside Charlie, then carefully untied his blue cape from around the dog's chest. "Jake, get back here," Emma called frantically. But her son ignored her. Instead, he held up the cape so everyone could see it, including the men who had terrorized Charlie. "This is my superhero cape," Jake announced in his clear 5-year-old voice. "I gave it to Charlie when he was scared and trapped. It made him brave." The lead man looked confused and annoyed. "Kid, get out of the way. This doesn't concern you." "Yes, it does," Jake said firmly. "Charlie is my friend. When you hurt him, you hurt me too." Then Jake did something that would later be talked about in news stories and shared on social media around the world. He walked over to Sam, who had a cut on his arm from glass during their escape, and carefully tied his blue cape around Sam's wounded arm like a bandage. "See?" Jake said, looking directly at the lead man. "This cape doesn't just make one person brave. It helps everyone who needs it. That's what real superheroes do. They help people, they don't hurt them." The simple gesture was so pure and unexpected that even the hardened criminals seemed taken aback. One of the younger men actually lowered his weapon slightly, but the lead man's face darkened with anger. "Enough of this. Grab the dog." That's when Charlie proved that Jake's lessons in courage had been mutual. Instead of running or attacking, Charlie stood up and walked calmly to the man's feet. Then he lay down and rolled onto his back, showing his belly in the ultimate gesture of trust and submission. "Charlie, no!" Jake cried out. But Charlie looked at Jake with calm, intelligent eyes. The dog was making a choice, showing these men that he would never be the vicious fighting animal they wanted him to be. No matter what they did to him, he would respond with gentleness. The lead man stared down at Charlie in frustration. "Get up! Fight!" But Charlie just lay there peacefully, looking up at the man with patient eyes. That's when Jake understood what Charlie was really doing. "He's showing them that they can't win," Jake said with wonder. "No matter what they do, Charlie will never be mean like them. He's too good for that." The man raised his hand as if to strike Charlie, but the moment was broken by the arrival of police cars from 3 different directions. Officers poured out with weapons drawn, surrounding the men in black. "Nobody move! Police!" The lead man looked around desperately, realizing his men were outnumbered and outgunned. But instead of surrendering, he made one last desperate attempt to grab Charlie. That's when something amazing happened. Charlie didn't cower or run. Instead, he rolled back to his feet and positioned himself between the man and Jake. Not aggressively, but firmly, like a living shield. The man lunged forward, but Charlie simply braced his body and absorbed the impact, sending the criminal stumbling backward into the arms of waiting police officers. "Charlie didn't hurt him," Jake observed with pride. "He just protected me without being mean." Officer Martinez, who had been coordinating the investigation all night, approached the family with a relieved smile. "Everyone okay here?" Emma nodded, pulling Jake close. Thanks to Charlie and Sam, we're all fine. And thanks to this little hero, Sam added, ruffling Jake's hair. This kid showed more courage tonight than most adults show in a lifetime. As the criminals were led away in handcuffs, Officer Martinez knelt down to speak with Jake. I heard you helped save Charlie. That was very brave of you. Jake looked over at Charlie, who was now sitting calmly beside him, with his tail wagging gently. Charlie saved me too. He taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you help people even when you are scared. Officer Martinez smiled. That's a very wise lesson, and I have some good news for you and Charlie. What kind of good news? Jake asked excitedly. Well, it turns out that Charlie was stolen from a family about 6 months ago. But when we contacted them, they told us they'd moved overseas and couldn't take him back. They said they just wanted him to go to a loving family who would take good care of him. Jake's eyes went wide. Does that mean? It means that if your parents agree, Charlie can officially become part of your family. No more foster arrangement. He can be your dog permanently. Jake let out a whoop of joy and threw his arms around Charlie's neck. The dog's tail wagged so hard his whole body wiggled with happiness. Emma felt tears of joy streaming down her face. After everything they'd been through, they were finally going to have their happy ending. But there's more, Officer Martinez continued. The information you helped us gather tonight led to the biggest dog-fighting bust in the city's history. We rescued 23 dogs from various locations, and we shut down a criminal network that had been operating for years. Sam nodded with satisfaction. Charlie's courage helped save a lot of other animals. That's not all, the officer added. The city wants to give Charlie and Jake a special recognition award for their bravery, and there's a reward for helping break up the criminal operation. David looked surprised. A reward? Enough to cover Charlie's veterinary care for several years, plus training and supplies. The city wants to make sure Charlie has everything he needs to live happily with his new family. Jake was practically bouncing with excitement. Did you hear that, Charlie? We're going to be official partners. Charlie barked happily and gently took the edge of Jake's shirt in his mouth, as if to say he approved of the arrangement. 3 weeks later, Emma stood in their backyard watching Jake and Charlie play together in the afternoon sun. The blue cape was tied around Charlie's neck again, but now it was clean and bright, fluttering behind him as he ran around the yard with Jake. David came out carrying 2 cups of coffee and sat down beside her on their new porch swing. Hard to believe it's only been 3 weeks since that storm. Emma nodded, watching Jake teach Charlie to sit and stay. It feels like Charlie's been part of our family forever. That's because he has been, David said with a smile. Some families are just meant to be together. Charlie had indeed become the perfect family dog. He was gentle, intelligent, and incredibly loyal to Jake. The two were inseparable, going on walks together every morning and playing in the backyard every afternoon. But the most amazing thing was how Charlie seemed to understand his role as a therapy dog. Word had gotten out about the brave dog who had helped break up a criminal network, and local schools had started inviting Charlie and Jake to visit and talk about courage and kindness. "Charlie," Jake called out from across the yard, "show Mommy and Daddy your new trick." Charlie immediately ran over and sat perfectly in front of the porch swing. Then he carefully took Jake's hand in his mouth and guided the little boy to sit beside him. "He's showing you that we're a team," Jake explained proudly. "Charlie and me, we help each other be brave." Emma's heart swelled with love and pride. "You certainly do, sweetie." Mrs. Helen appeared at the back gate, carrying a plate of her famous cookies. She had become a regular visitor, and Charlie always greeted her with gentle enthusiasm. "How are my 2 heroes today?" she asked, sitting down to join them. "Charlie learned a new trick," Jake announced, immediately demonstrating how Charlie could shake hands and roll over on command. "Very impressive," Mrs. Helen said with a smile. "Have you decided what you're going to say at the school assembly tomorrow?" Jake nodded seriously. Tomorrow, he and Charlie were going to speak to an entire elementary school about their adventure and the importance of helping others. "I'm going to tell them that superheroes aren't just in movies," Jake said. "They're real, and they can be anyone who helps someone else. Even kids can be superheroes." Emma exchanged a meaningful glance with David. Their 5-year-old son had learned lessons about courage, compassion, and heroism that would stay with him for the rest of his life. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in the same pink and gold colors they'd seen that morning in the park, Charlie curled up beside Jake on the grass. The little boy rested his head against Charlie's side, and both of them looked completely content. "Charlie says he's happy," Jake announced sleepily. "How can you tell?" Emma asked, even though she could see the answer in the dog's peaceful expression. "Because I'm happy too," Jake replied simply. "And Charlie and me, we feel the same things now. We're family." Emma looked at her son and his four-legged best friend, both wearing parts of that famous blue cape, both having taught each other about bravery and love. It was a perfect ending to an incredible story. But as she watched them together, Emma realized this wasn't really an ending at all. It was just the beginning of many more adventures for Jake and Charlie, the boy and dog who had shown an entire city what real heroism looked like. Sometimes the most powerful rescues begin with the smallest acts of kindness, and sometimes, when you're brave enough to help someone else, you end up saving yourself too. If this story touched your heart, please share it with others and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Stories like this remind us that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and that love and courage can overcome even the darkest situations. Charlie and Jake's story shows us that sometimes the most extraordinary adventures begin with the simplest act of caring about someone else. When a 5-year-old boy saw a scared dog in trouble, he didn't hesitate to help, and that one act of kindness changed both their lives forever.